Welcome everyone to Friday at 4, production of VDCTV. My name is Guy Page. I'm here with our co-host and production engineer and social media director, Paul Bean. You may notice something is a little bit different. Said, boy, what'd they do to the Bean building, huh? Well, actually, no, we're not in the Bean building. Thank you very, very much. We are so grateful for the support and assistance of 802 Scoop on Main Street in Barrie. We are using their studios now, and looks like we will be for the foreseeable future. First of all, it's warmer. Right now, the Bean building's kind of cold. We'd be all bundled up. But also, it's just got a, probably better lighting and just a more professional setup.
Yeah.
Paul, you happy to be here?
I am. Believe it or not, it takes a lot of pressure off of me to be able to do this in here, moving stuff around, and it's nice. This is a nice setup. They have some pretty nice equipment, so I'm thankful to be here. Donald Koch writes, "Welcome to Barrie." Hey, thank you, Donald. You've got a hometown guy here. Well, Barrie town guy, and we're in Barrie City. I know that's a very touchy subject here, but thankfully, yeah, no, I'm pretty happy to be in here, and yeah, I mean, for the foreseeable future, definitely. Maybe we'll be back in the spring, back at the old studios and in Northfield. Right. But it's time to a little evolution here for what we've been doing, and I think this is just what we needed because, I mean, you can see these camera qualities are nice. There's good lighting. We don't have these big junky mics on our face anymore. We got these little guys. So hopefully everybody agrees that this is a good jump for now. And Donald writes the Greater Barrie area, which is good.
So I'm really curious to know, Paul, first of all, can people hear us well?
I think they can hear us just fine.
Can they see us well?
I think they can. Guys, please.
Are they looking at reruns of the Three Stooges instead?
No. It's
good.
If you can't, if you have any issues, let us know in the comments, folks. I have people saying we're good. Tom Koch, by the way, says, "Do I now spell your name with an I?"
Oh, yes. I've decided, see, Brooke Page, he decided to adopt me. No, that isn't what happened. There was just a little bit of a typo. This is the first episode glitch going on.
That's right.
Yeah, so next week we'll have that fixed, and my name really is spelled the way an editor's name should be, which is Page, P-A-G-E. Yeah. So anyway, about our show, we are sponsored by Ranmar Corporation, Randy Rulo and his gang. They build houses, they excavate, terrific home builders, and we thank them very much for believing in VDCTV, in VDC, and very appreciative of their sponsorship. This week's show, well, hey, what's happening in 11 days, Paul?
I don't know, Guy. I think it's like my brother's having a kid or something.
The Knicks-Bucks game?
Oh, yeah, I think it's the election.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, the election. So we will be talking about the election. We've got 3 or 4 stories lined up. And, we have things we want to talk about, but we want to talk with you. And unfortunately, one thing, we don't have the phone thing going yet, but you can do your comments on X, YouTube, and Facebook. We welcome that. Whatever you want to talk about with the Vermont or even the national election, because we will be talking about both today. First, though, is a couple non-election stories that you may have missed if you haven't been reading the Vermont Daily Chronicle this week. And 2 big ones, really. One is that money from George Soros, the billionaire leftist philanthropist, is bailing out repeat offenders in St. Albans. The mayor of St. Albans, Tim Smith, has pointed out an organization that he said is bailing out the repeat offenders who are just, burglarizing and doing all sorts of stuff in St. Albans. And he's not happy about it. And our reporter, Mike Bolosky, traced back that organization to an organization called Tides, which is founded by Soros and funded by him and also by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So once again, you see the impact of the big international globalist money on little old Vermont, on life as we live it in Vermont. If you're living up in St. Albans and your house has just been burglarized by a guy who's been bailed out for the umpteenth time with the help of George Soros, well, you know who to thank. So that's one story. Another story, a little bit more political. Representative Laura Sibilia, an independent from Dover, has announced that she will challenge House Speaker Joe Kowinski, Democrat, leader of the Democrat supermajority, the current Democrat supermajority, for Speaker of the House, assuming that they both win re-election, which I think is fairly likely, I think. And the reason that's important is that, first of all, it's been a while since there was a real challenge. And also, if for some reason, now if Kowinski successfully wins back a supermajority, very unlikely that they're going to be paying any attention to anything Laura Sibilia is doing. But should the Democrats lose the supermajority, lose the ability to veto Phil Scott's bills, to override his vetoes of their bills, well then, whole different political calculus happening. Suddenly the supermajority is no longer so super. And they may be thinking, time for a change of leadership. There's a lot of independent, maybe ambitious people within the ranks of the Democratic legislators who would frankly like to be chairman or chairwoman. And maybe a few Republicans too would like that. So we could be, it's not a crazy thought, maybe not likely, not a crazy thought, that if on 11 days from now, the legislature picks up 5, 6, 7 more Republican House seats and the supermajority is lost, this could have a big impact on legislation. Yes, Paul?
Not only if they lose seats as to Republicans, it's if the current Democratic establishment that's there loses seats to more moderate, or maybe not moderate Democrats, but people that aren't necessarily just going to stick and always vote with the party. Right? So there's the potential of that happening in a handful of districts around the state, from what I understand.
I think that's right. And there's no doubt the governor has been wooing centrist Democrats to kind of come on over. You remember that interview we had with Jay Hooper.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Yeah, and I know I don't want to jump ahead, but there is somebody who's running for a House seat down in the Rutland area. Is that a Republican who's running, Keyser, or is that a?
Oh, that's Republican.
That's a Republican.
Yeah.
Okay, but who is he running against?
He is running against. This is fascinating. I'm glad you brought this up. The assistant majority leader of the assistant supermajority leader is a fellow named Bill Knott. I think that's how we pronounce his last name. Runs a comic book store in Rutland, and often will show up with the coolest comic book T-shirts on at the legislature. But he is, he's one of the leaders of the supermajority.
What does that mean, assistant to the?
Okay, the Democratic leadership, the supermajority. There's the Speaker of the House who runs the whole House supposedly, but then the Democratic caucus, which is I believe 104 now, 100 and something. It's sizable. They have their own caucus, their own supermajority caucus, and they have a majority leader, someone who's the head of that caucus. That's Emily Long out of Newfane. And one of the assistant majority leaders is Bill Knott.
Okay.
And Bill, if I'm mispronouncing your name, I apologize. Okay. If any of your listeners are there, and I am, please let me know. So he is one of the faces of of the Democratic supermajority, and running against him. See, we're on Main Street in Barrie, folks, and
I don't know if they can hear that. I don't know.
okay,
Tell us
well,
if you could.
You just heard a cart or something rumble by.
Skateboards.
Skateboard.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, that's why.
We heard it.
Yeah, we heard it. Anyway, so running against him, and this is a fascinating story in today's Vermont Daily Chronicle. Please check it out. I won't be able to do it all justice. But you talk about full circle. The last Republican governor was, before the real rise of the Democrats, in 1962, when Phil Hoff, who practiced law off and on with my dad in Burlington, was elected governor in 1962, the Republican incumbent that he beat was F. Ray Keyser. Oh, I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. And his son is, for the first time, having just pretty much concluded, although he's still in it, but a very successful business career, has decided that, boy, it's time. It's time to run for office again. His name is Chris, and he said that the legislative pay raise, their vote to essentially double their pay, when you count in all the perks and all the additions, at a time when the rest of the state is just reeling. This was in 2023. That and the property tax increase of 14 would have been 20% property tax increase, except for two other big taxes they tossed on top of there. He said, I was just getting angrier and angrier about that. And he was out on a hike, and he gets this phone call, and it's Governor Scott on the other line. And he says, will you run for office? And he said, I've never really done politics, but I'm ready now. And what do you make of that, Paul, that someone's out hiking and he gets a phone call from the governor saying, hey, will you run for office? What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, man, what do I make of that? Good question. I think it's interesting that Governor Scott, from really the beginning of this election season, has been recruiting. I just from the interactions I've had with some folks that are part of his team over the past 6 months, it's been made pretty clear to me that they're not only recruiting heavily, but not just in one party. They're going, like we've mentioned earlier, they're going across the aisle, recruiting some of those centrist Ds. But man, can you imagine just being on a hike and then you just randomly get a phone call from the governor of Vermont and he's asking you to run for office?
Yeah.
And I know that he wasn't the only person that had done that, or at least received that phone call. From what I understand is when they were kind of in their recruitment process, is they were going around and they were hearing names of certain people that were considering running. And then as a final sales pitch at the end, they would send in the big guns and they'd have the governor give somebody a call. And I mean, hey, look, I don't care who you are. You get a couple legislators to ask you to run. You're maybe like, that's a good idea. I trust them. They believe in me. Or maybe you get your state senator to ask you to run, or somebody in a higher office. But you get a call from the governor, and the most popular governor in the country. It's got to be pretty hard to say no to. We'd love to hear what you guys think of that in the comments. If you got a call from Governor Scott, would you run for office? Let us know. And Colette, by the way, Colette says, yes, heard the skateboards.
Okay.
That's good to know.
Thank you. Thank you, Colette.
Yeah. But I don't know, Guy. What do you make of that? If you had got a call from the governor, would you decide to do it? It's kind of a tough, unfair question to ask you.
Well, it is tough because, full disclosure, I was asked.
You were?
Several years ago, whether I would run for a House seat. And I really thought about it, and the more I thought about it, I said, I can sit there as part of a super minority in the back of the cafeteria with all the other 20 or 30 members, it felt like at times.
Yeah.
Or I could do what I'm really called to do, which is report and write and do something that really, until Paul Bean came along, no one else was really doing.
Yep.
So I'm happy to continue doing that. But I will say, I was flattered, interested, and really just about to say, yeah, I'll do it, until I thought, I can't do both. You really can't cover the State House and be a reporter at the same time. I will say that if the Vermont Daily Chronicle ever grew to the point where I was essentially just kind of a publisher overseeing things, and we had regular State House reporters who were really doing the hard work of covering the State House, that's a situation where I might think about it. But that's not why we got in the air, folks.
Not yet,
Talk
not
about
yet. Who asked you to run?
Someone, a Republican in Washington County. Yeah.
Okay. That's all.
Right. Right. I think you know him.
I think I probably
Yeah.
do. Well, anyways, we do have a lot to talk about today, Guy.
We do?
I think that's a great story we just talked about there. But one of the things that I want to talk about was the Bernie Sanders-Gerald Malloy debate on Vermont Public the other day. And I know that there was another one last night, folks. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to watch it, so don't spoil it for me. No, just kidding. I don't care if you do. But point is, that was a very interesting debate. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit more before the show, and I've interviewed Gerald Malloy, and Guy, you've met him. And
you posted that on the Chronicle Facebook page, right?
yeah, actually, there's a clip right in the
Yes.
Chronicle's Facebook page if you want to go check this clip out.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what the clip is, unless you want to go watch it, of course, first.
Well,
yeah.
tell us.
Well, the clip itself is Bernie and Gerald Malloy are kind of having this back and forth where, you know, they ask each other questions. You get an opportunity to ask each other questions. And basically what Bernie had asked is, Gerald Malloy, how could you vote for somebody who's incites violence, and he's an insurrectionist, and he's
Fomented an insurrection.
fomented an
Fomented an insurrection.
That's what he keeps saying. Yeah, he does
Yes.
keep saying that.
And is a pathological liar.
Yes. That's what he keeps saying. And so what happened was Bernie asked him, you know, how could you vote for him? And then at the end, Gerald explains why, and then says, see, for me, it's a binary thing. Like, I don't know how you could pick Kamala. You know, I like Bernie, or I like Trump. That's who I want to vote for. And Bernie, at the end of his answering of his question, Bernie goes, oh, you didn't answer the question. And he goes, what do you mean? He's like, I asked you how, you know, you could vote for a pathological liar. And Gerald did not hold back. I mean, he basically went, you know, like Bernie says, I've never run a negative ad in all my years of campaigning. He says, well, you call people pathological liars. And Bernie goes, that's because he is. And he got really violently upset. And it's like, whoa, like it's almost unlike him. And there's a handful of instances where that happened.
Yeah, I had that same thought, Paul, that this is not the Bernie I know.
No.
I mean, Bernie, if nothing else, is in control of himself and doesn't just sort of toss out political talking points. You know, he will say that this is why he lied, and here's why I'm right, and here's what I've done. It's one of the things actually I have always kind of liked about Bernie, and I got to say I lost a little bit of the considerable respect I have for Bernie because he just sort of tossed this line out, and you know,
and kept doing it too.
Yeah, and you know, a pathological liar does not make campaign promises, hard to keep campaign promises, and then keep them, as he did, as Trump did, undeniably.
Yeah.
There's so many things he said, I'm going to do this, things that have never been done before, and he went and he did them. So is that the work of a liar? The Democrats are always talking about how smart it is to their own base, talk one way, and then come general election time, they pivot. Like politics is a basketball game or something. They pivot. Oh, boom. Well, no, that's just being disingenuous.
Yeah.
When you say one thing to one base so you can win a primary, and then you intentionally, with everyone applauding, oh, isn't he politically smart, then turn and say something completely different to me, that's what people don't like about politics. And frankly, that's one of the things I have always liked about Bernie Sanders, is that he's, whatever his positions, you kind of always know where Bernie stands.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I really like about Donald Trump is that you're never at a loss to know where Donald Trump stands on an issue. He will tell you ad infinitum sometimes.
Well, it's kind of like what Gerald Malloy had said, is that they're more similar than, I mean, we maybe had said that to, or not Gerald Malloy, General Flynn.
Yes, General
Flynn.
Flynn.
General Flynn
And
said,
Mark
say
Serrano,
what
too.
you will about him, he really is an independent.
Yeah.
And I think that is technically true. However, I do see him, like just to go a little bit more into the debate, and I have a couple other things I want to mention about what you said, pivoting, so don't let me forget that. But going a little bit more into the debate, it's like, and we see this everywhere in politics right now, across the political spectrum, across the country, with Democrats and Republicans. You have Democrats that are campaigning on climate change, abortion, and not Trump.
Right.
And one, if you will, one of those things, and I would say is climate change, is the most, in my opinion, most compelling. I mean, I'm not and you know what I think of climate change, but ultimately, you have abortion, which has been decided that it goes back to the states, and the states are to decide. Both J.D. Vance and Trump have said, we're not going to sign a nationwide abortion ban. We're not doing that because we believe in the states' rights. And if they were to, and I actually think Malloy said this too.
Yes, he did.
Is if they were to do that he would oppose it because, and he would vote against it.
He said that last night?
He did say that 2 nights ago.
VP one, yeah.
He did say that because he said that it's up to the states and that goes against the Constitution, which Roe v. Wade technically, I mean, you could go into deep arguments about that. But anyway, one thing you mentioned I want to go back to. When I ran for office in 2022, I was advised by a certain someone to not use red, white, and blue or stars or anything like that on my campaign material. And interestingly enough, right, because you don't want to be associated with Trump, right, because somehow he's associated with America, which I guess that's a bad thing, right? I mean, I don't know. Right? I don't know. But
so he puts on his non-red, white, and blue Make America Gray hat again. Okay.
This is the dark MAGA Elon hat, version.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. So anyway, he said, don't use that stuff. And I said, okay. So I went with green and orange, and kind of thinking, the idea was, you don't want just to be associated with Trump immediately. And if you use American patriotic symbols, then you are, which is so sick to me. I mean, it's discouraging.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of Democrats, starting at the very top with Kamala Harris. They made their Kamala hat, the camo Kamala hat, as if they're somehow, Republican. Not Republican, but like maybe like
her and a shotgun out in a duck blind.
Yeah, Woodsy, and like well, you mean her and
Tim Waltz? What do I do with this? Which end do I hold?
It was just so weird. It's like, what are you guys doing? You're LARPing. Like that's LARPing. So I see that.
LARPing. What the heck's LARPing?
You never heard that before?
No.
Oh, it's like maybe somebody else can explain it better than I can in the comments.
Laughing at ridiculous people? I don't know.
It means like people that would like pretend that they're fighting like in a medieval fight, so they dress up like they're in all sorts of garb. So that's LARPing, and that's kind of what I get the sense of, like they're LARPing as hunters and conservatives, and like it's like, well, what? So back to the point though, it's like that's a complete pivot, right? Because to their base, they're woke, right?
Right.
But then you have point is, I was looking at some stuff last night with some candidates down in Windsor County with Andrea Murray, and she was showing me some of the political ads that her opponents have made. They're calling themselves the Dream Team. This is Becca White, Allison Clarkson, and another name.
Joe Major.
Joe Major. And I was looking at their designs, and they're using the colors red, white, and blue on their designs, and they never had before. And it's like, it's almost like there's like this sense right now, especially with Trump, and we got to talk more about Malloy's numbers too, but it's like, it's almost like there's this sense right now that this American idealism, American exceptionalism, like the culture is hungry for it.
Yes.
Even the young Gen Z, like we see what our grandparents had and we're like, what about that?
Yeah.
So it's like almost like a nostalgic thing. I don't know, maybe you can touch on that a little bit more.
there's definitely a sense in the last few years that America, we have lost a sense of identity, patriotism, American pride.
Mm-hmm.
Had that beaten out of us by the George Floyd movement, by DEI, by lots of things. And as that is becoming more obviously bankrupt, as the people running BLM basically have been found to have bought mansions with that money, and almost none of it actually going to help like black people, where they live, which is where it should have gone to. You're seeing people saying, that is so 2020, 2021. And
we're over it.
Yeah.
The culture's shifting, I think, in that perspective. And by the way, Big Siege writes, LARP means live action role playing. That's what that means. I kind of knew it. Sorry.
Thank you, Big Z.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Actually, Maureen Heck for Vermont State Senate, she writes, my campaign colors are red, white, and blue, the color of our flag. The leftists are so triggered by our national flag colors. It's funny. I was at a select board meeting in Northfield the other day, and I was there with a friend of mine, and we all got up and said the Pledge of Allegiance, and he turns to me and he says, that's the first time I've said that in like 5 years. And I said, I've been to a handful of not just these select board meetings, but city councils, and they still do them. But
I blow away the press gallery whenever they say it on Tuesdays in the State House, because I think I'm the only reporter who stands up, puts my hand over my heart, and loudly says the Pledge of Allegiance. And the rest of them, and I don't blame them. They're not there as participants, okay? No. And that could be seen as I suppose, as some sort of participatory thing. But I don't care. I'm an American first, and I do love our country, and if only liberty and justice for all.
So just one more thing, and we did talk a little bit about the Malloy debate. I just wanted to say, it's like we had said, there wasn't a whole lot of substance or policy conversation from Bernie Sanders. Yeah. It was a lot of climate change. He really wanted to nail that home. He did that a lot, and apparently the WCAX one, I haven't seen that yet. They talked a lot about that too.
Okay.
But Bernie just kind of seemed to want to Trump. How could you support Trump?
Yeah.
And something that you and I were talking about, Guy, is Bernie. Malloy didn't really hold back. And here, excuse the fire alarms, folks. Once again, we're in downtown Barrie. New location. We're trying this out. But
hey, at least there's no classic cars revving their engines like at Bean Studios.
There's nobody doing burnouts today, thankfully. But not yet, anyway. But the point is that Gerald Malloy was he didn't Bernie was trying to back him into this corner about Trump and saying, well, he's a pathological liar, and Malloy didn't hold back. He even said, here's a man who's been in office for 35 years and keeps making the same promises and doesn't do anything. How about that for a pathological liar? And I think the point is I think a lot of people, and I think even Bernie and maybe their advisors, they thought that Malloy was just going to be like, well, I'm not really that big of a Trump supporter, almost trying to pander to the base voters.
Backpedal.
Yeah, and backpedal.
No, he didn't.
He didn't. And what does that tell you, Guy?
Tells me, first of all, that Gerald Malloy has matured in his political skills, because a few years ago he would have had a hard time doing that. It also tells me the weakness of living in the left of center media bubble, and the only people you talk to are people you agree with, is when Becca Balint, having her somewhat earth-shattering debate with Mark Coaster on Vermont Public, and so much that 7 Days did a cartoon highlighting what Mark was saying, and Michaela Lefrak, the moderator, and Becca Balint going, pulling their hair out. And then Bernie, again, someone who, they don't know what to do.
No.
When someone actually says, this is what I really think, and it is so different from what you think, and here are the reasons why I think this. For example, here's a fellow who is a career military officer saying the worst thing that Joe Biden has done is draw us into and help to start, by his weakness, 2 major military conflicts, and we're closer to World War III than we've ever been. You know what? That's an awful lot more important than, I don't like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You know, that has to do with, like, you know, incineration of cities. That's a lot more important than some thing that we want to say about Donald Trump. So Malloy was taking it to him, and they're not used to that.
They're not.
Because they don't, whereas Malloy, that's the world he lives in. It's a media hostile environment. 2/3 of the doors he knocks on are going to be people who like Bernie Sanders. So he's used to this. Yeah. Bernie and Becca Balint, not so much.
No, they're not used to being challenged.
Right.
And I think you're seeing that across the board right now. Like, we keep saying that. Look, I'm pretty hopeful for November 5th. I don't want to get my hopes up completely. I mean, to say Gerald Malloy is going to beat Bernie Sanders, let's be honest, folks, that's a really hard race to win. But I think that Malloy really showed something in that debate the other night. And I look forward to watching the next one. But I think you're just seeing this like across the board. Last night I was at an event in Norwich, Vermont, which is the bluest of the blue.
When you say Norwich, you're not talking Norwich University, Northfield. You're talking about
the satellite of Dartmouth University.
Right across the river from Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and you know, the sentiment there, so it was an event for a handful of candidates. Kevin Blakeman was the real spearhead of it. Kevin Blakeman's running for House down in Windsor Orange 2.
Which is where?
I think it's Sharon, Stratford, Thetford, and Norwich.
Oh, okay.
So he set that event up, and then Lisa Flanders, who's his running mate, she was there. Andrea Murray was there. Gleason was there. I think it's Jack Gleason or John. I'm sorry if I messed that up. But so there was a handful of candidates, and a gentleman walked in, and so there was a grouping of people too. There was not a crazy crowd. Like, I'm not going to embellish, but I was like, this is pretty good for this place, you know. And it's a nice little room at the Norwich Inn, and a gentleman walks in, and he started really like grilling each and every candidate. He wanted to talk to every single person that was a candidate because he wanted to know, you know, he did what every voter is supposed to do. That's what it was very admirable. It was one of those things where it's like, what are you doing? So I, as a reporter, and I do have some material to come about this in next week's news.
Good.
But I asked him, you know, what brought you here tonight? And he goes, I just can't understand what they're doing in Montpelier and why they're doing it anymore. And he did talk to me a little bit about what he does, and he's involved in the solar business, believe it or not. You know, he knows a lot about how this place works, and he knows that it's not meant to work for the Vermonter or the ratepayer, which that's a whole other subject. I don't want to dive too deep into that right now. But so I said, how do you vote usually? Just plain and simple. How do you usually vote? Democrat right down the ballot. And I said, are you planning to this year? He said, absolutely not. So that's anecdotally, that's one person, right? Yep. But he's not alone in that. I know that there's probably hundreds more like him, not just in that area, but around the state.
What are the triggers, do you think, for that?
For people to go over the top? Well, I honestly think, I really think people are not falling for the mass media hysteria anymore. And I'm not entirely correct about that. I don't, when we talk about, there's a deeper implication to like mass, what do they call that? Mass formation psychosis, which is like, we saw this giant psychosis of really the whole nation during COVID. And then people kind of like over the last 3 years have like snapped out of it. They're like.
So if it's not the mass formation, Paul, then what is it? Well, what are the real life sort of, things?
You mean like what people are feeling?
Yeah, and what they're seeing that's making them say, well, I was voting D, but I think I'm going to do R now.
Well, I think it's a mix of many things. I just want to say quick, the mass formation thing, I think there's something to that because people are not like hypnotized the same way that they were by the mass news anymore. People are starting to question, and I think that's because of guys like us. I really mean that. People that are out there doing these, small cell news type businesses.
Guys like Elon. Guys like
Elon.
Like Raylene Mounier and
Michael Boudin.
And Mike Boudin.
No, and of course the Aired Out podcast too. But I mean, it's just like I think there's a lot of people out there that are doing their own work. And like, for instance, in my own family, it's like I have older family members that have only ever watched the mainstream news. And then here comes along their grandson doing a show, and they're like, wait, what is he talking about? Wait, is he right about that? And then they dig in a little bit, and because the access to information is more accessible. I think there's a number of reasons. But I think the big ones in Vermont, why people are paying more attention, is pocketbook. I really do. Like, I don't care how wealthy you are. There's so many people that, the guy I met last night, he said, I didn't really know what was going on. And then I got my property tax bill. And in Norwich, it's gone up something like 40%.
I've heard about that.
And I think that's only 40% because of the school stuff. Then there's a municipal budget, which has caused their property taxes to go up even more, which is what he told me. He said, I don't even know as much about the school stuff. I know about the municipal budget. That's a whole other thing. But I don't even know about the property taxes.
Wow.
So he was explaining to me like what he knew. And I think that's what it is. I think that's what it comes down to. A lot of people got their property tax bills and they're like, well, what the heck is going on? I don't know.
Yeah.
I do have a few comments here.
Go for it.
Big Siege writes, Paul Bean's outfit reminds me of something my uncle would have worn in 1993. You know where I got this? My grandfather. He gave it to me the other day.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
So that is your grandfather's hand-me-down.
Yes, it is.
Well then, Big Siege, I commend your perspicacity.
That was a good guess. Libby Moyer writes, Norwich VT is the hometown of Jane Watson Stenson, the former financial chair of the DNC.
Yes, that's right.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it is a must-stop place for Democrats who are trying to raise big money. That's right.
Big Siege, and you must be talking about the political, the election, the upcoming presidential election. You were right. Governor Scott is willing to roll the dice on World War III because he wants the political class in Vermont to be kind and like him. I know what you're getting at, and I think he hasn't endorsed Kamala, has he?
No, he hasn't. I asked him at a press conference, so who are you going to vote for, Governor? And because something really something egregious that just happened that I think he couldn't countenance. And he said, well, it isn't just Harris and Trump on the ballot.
Yeah.
So if I had to guess, since RFK's name is actually still on the ballot and RFK has said, look, feel free to vote for me in states where it's really not up in the air, which, realistically, Vermont is going to be a Harris state. I've got a feeling, I don't know, but I think he's probably going to say RFK looks pretty good.
I completely disagree with you.
Okay.
I'll tell you why.
You're fired.
Yeah, no! All right, see you guys.
Well, I didn't say the right. You're fired.
You're fired.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the reason why is because RFK endorsed Trump.
Well, I know, but RFK also said, go ahead and even though I've endorsed Trump, if my name is on the ballot in a state that's a solid red or solid blue, go ahead and vote for me.
You don't think that would upset a lot of the? I don't know. I don't think.
I think he's going to vote for everyone.
I think he's going to vote for Kamala. That's what I think he's going to do. I know. I'm sorry. I just do.
He might if Vermont were really in play, but
it's not.
It's not.
It's not. It's always the same.
And he is, boy, Governor Scott is so focused on the incivility, what he perceives as the incivility of Donald Trump, and all of the problems that have resulted from that. I've asked him questions about what are we going to do about flood relief or something, and he says, well, we've got a real problem with the incivility of our national discourse, and we need to be talk nicer to each other. And it's like, well, you didn't exactly answer my question there, Governor. But this is so much on his mind. It really is close to his heart, I think.
What do you mean, the civility of the national discourse?
That Donald Trump has been an instigator of the national incivility in political discussion, is what he says. And I got to say, probably something to that.
I think he's right about that. I also think that the incivility comes from a place of, hey, this is how the people are getting screwed.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about this. And
Right.
he's been put constantly. I mean, I don't know. Somebody did say to me, he came in guns a-blazing, Trump.
Well,
and I don't know.
sure he did.
I don't really remember it that well.
Have you ever seen the movie
15.
True Grit?
True Grit? I have seen True Grit.
Well,
yeah.
the final scene where John Wayne puts, the other guys, there's like 10 of them, and he's on one horse, and they've got 10 horses, and he takes out his 6 guns and says, "Fill your hands with lead, you blankety blank blank." And he puts the reins in his teeth and goes right at him, both guns blazing. Yeah, that's Donald Trump.
That is.
That scene. I think he probably watches that movie and cries and thinks, yes, that's me, that's me.
So, Guy, what else do we have on the docket for today?
I'm not dating myself.
No, there's a new version of True Grit.
There is, yes.
There is a
that's
new
what I was
version.
talking
There's
about.
a new
Although John Wayne did it better than
Yeah,
Jeff Bridges,
yeah.
if you ask me.
Yeah.
But Jeff Bridges did a great job, too. All right, yeah, so the renewable industry complex. They are doing their very best to get their people elected, not just people who agree with them, who agree with renewable power, but the actual lawyers who are suing the state of Vermont for not meeting their carbon emissions goal quickly enough. Anna Taddeo, who is a staff attorney for the Vermont Conservation Law Foundation, is running in Rutland against a fellow challenger. Paul Clifford, the Republican incumbent, has stepped aside. And so it's Republican challenger Chris Howland and Democrat challenger Anna Taddeo. And Anna Taddeo is not only a supporter of renewable power, as most Democrats are, she is a staff attorney who makes her living with the Conservation Law Foundation, which is the group that has sued the state of Vermont, has filed suit against the state because it has not aggressively met its carbon reduction goals as laid out by the Global Warming Solution Act. And so you have someone who wants to work for the state when her day job, as it were, is suing the state. And to me, the most egregious part of that, besides what I think is kind of a conflict of interest there, if your paycheck comes from suing the voters of the state of Vermont, is on her campaign page, she says, well, her most recent job was as an immigration lawyer for the U.S. Council on Immigration and Refugees. Never mentions the fact that she is now working for CLF. So if you're in Rutland, or really, if you might want to ask of whoever your House and Senate candidates are, find out, what is their connection? Do they have a family connection? Do they have a business connection with the renewable power industry in Vermont? And then ask yourself, is that something that, knowing that they are going to be even financially biased, but definitely sort of point of worldview bias towards renewable energy siting, towards the Global Warming Solutions Act, towards the Affordable Heat Act that will add costs, who knows, $1.80 to $4 per gallon of heating oil, depending on how it all shakes out. Is this what we want? And is that what you want? And speaking of the Conservation Law Foundation, there is another family connection with one of their staff attorneys. There's Elena Mahaly, who is if I understand it correctly, is kind of the lead attorney for CLF on this filing suit against the state. A family member of hers is one of the legislature's leading voices for the Affordable Heat Act and Global Warming Solutions Act. Mark Mahaly from Washington County Rep from, I want to say, Calais. And I'm not exactly sure. I think it's either a daughter or a daughter-in-law. I'm not sure, but I do know that there's a rather immediate family connection there. So CLF has got, besides having they got the power of the lawsuit built into this law, this Global Warming Solutions Act. They also have now strong connections in the representation of the House of Representatives itself. And got to wonder, how good is that for Vermont governance? Paul, any thoughts on that?
Well, I do, and I have a comment here from Maureen Heck. She says, that's a conflict of interest. Simple as that. I mean, it is a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And
by the way, props to Maureen. There's an independent who's running for the Senate, and the incumbent, Richie Westman, is a Republican. My understanding is that Maureen is probably more conservative than Richie is. But people who are willing to put it out there and to run.
I thought she was in. I'm sorry. I thought she was in Washington County, but you might know better than me. I thought she was in Washington County. I thought she was from Stowe.
Well, she is if it's who I'm thinking, she's from Hyde Park, represents. Stowe is actually, oddly enough, in the Washington County district. But she's Hyde Park, lives in Hyde Park, and I believe is the Lamoille.
She says Lamoille County.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Guy, I just want to add a little bit to what you're saying. It seems like there's so many instances where there's connections like this in Vermont. Vermont is so small, right? I mean, it's such a small place.
It's true.
So it's kind of hard to avoid, I guess.
Well,
I mean, I'll say this: this instance where you have somebody who's running for House and they're actively suing the state of Vermont. I don't even know who would vote for that person. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, I would say to the Vermont so small thing, if this was the House Judiciary Committee and 5 of the 9 members were serving police officers. I'm not sure that the social justice people would be saying, oh, well, Vermont, it's a small state. They'd be saying, no, that's a conflict of interest. And in that case, they'd probably be right.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be careful before we just sort of accept, well, it's a small state. So one last story I did want to bring up, Paul.
Sure.
And if I already have talked about it on the show,
I know we were talking a lot about stuff before we started. I was wondering, did I already say this on the show? But
right. Yes, folks, we do talk about this ahead of time.
Sometimes an hour before.
It does, amazingly enough. But have I brought up the Chris Bray
Nope.
thing? Okay.
I don't think so.
So Chris Bray.
Folks, tell us if we did. I don't think you did.
At Addison County, longtime Addison County senator, the extremely influential chair of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. So if there's a land conservation bill, it goes through there. If there's a renewable power bill, it goes through there, through his committee. If there's an Act 250 reform bill, it goes through there. If there's a Global Warming Solutions Act, if there's an affordable heat, the highest profile legislation, besides maybe the education stuff. Oh, if there's a hunting bill, the coyotes and that kind of thing, all goes through his committee. And as the chair of that committee, he really is the ultimate thumbs up, thumbs down on these bills. So we broke the story a few months ago that he was in a personal relationship with a lobbyist for a public affairs firm that was lobbying in support of some of this legislation. And just a few days ago, within 2 weeks of the election, and sorry, but you got to say somewhat politically timed, okay?
Of course.
Electorally timed.
Not a stupid move, though.
Well, I'm not saying it is,
No.
but one must at least concede the political, electoral timing.
Especially as reporters, implication.
Right.
Yeah.
The Vermont GOP filed an ethics complaint against Bray saying, look, you have a personal relationship where you are perhaps being unduly influenced in your decision making, which has such an important bearing on the future of the state of Vermont. And of course, we don't know because we weren't there. And that may well be. I will say that Chris Bray has been a very strong supporter of pretty much any opposing Act 250 reform. He's been a supporter of renewable power, of mandates, of carbon emission mandates, that sort of the whole gamut. He has been 100% lockstep in support. So I suppose it's possible that there really was some undue influence. I got to think, my own personal opinion here is that he already had these opinions and had for years before he cast these decisive votes and made these important decisions in committee. And now there's someone running against him, and that actually, for me, is a very telling point for the people who say that the two candidates running against him might be a good choice. Because if you oppose what Chris Bray has stood for the last many terms that he's had in the Vermont Senate, if you oppose that, then you've got an opportunity here for voting for Steve Heffernan, Landell Cochran, and Heffernan in particular has been making a very strong case for why Addison County would be better served voting for him.
I hear he's putting up quite a campaign.
I do too. I do too.
I haven't been up there in a while, but I've heard that these signs are just everywhere. And obviously signs don't vote, but... Yeah,
well, but John Walters, VPO, ran a story the other day saying, Chris Bray is sort of moping about the election here, and he doesn't need to. He's going to win anyway. Hey, it's Addison County, bluer than blue. But just the fact that he's having to write those stories, well, he wasn't writing those 2 years ago.
No.
When others who, kind of took him for the team and ran on the Republican ticket, but it was a different dynamic then. So, if anything, it will be closer. And who knows, Paul? We live in our own little bubble, unfortunately, and it may be that the supermajority will be even larger. It may be that there will be 4 senators who will vote to support Governor Scott rather than the 7 or 8 or 9 that there are now. But there may not be. It might turn around, and I guess we're just going to find out. Folks, and we are going to be here Tuesday night, November 5th. Paul and I are going to be giving you the results as they come in, as we did with the primary. That was so much fun.
Yeah, it was.
We're going to do that again this year, and we are definitely looking forward to that. Paul, that is pretty much what I had to say. Do you have anything else?
Well, I just, back to just quickly, you're saying potentially it could be worse, right? The supermajority could get bigger. I don't see that happening. And I know we live in our own bubble. Yeah. At the very worst case, yes, it could get worse. Bad case, things would stay the same. Yeah. I don't see that happening. I think that people across the state are feeling the pain of, property tax increases, DMV increases, just across the board.
So you don't think Orange Man Bad is going to...
No, I don't think that's overriding people's necessity to survive, right? Like, there's a difference between, there was always it's funny. I had this conversation with my brother last night. There's problems all over the country right now, and there has always been political issues, always been corruption. There's always been dark money, dark things happening, right? Mm-hmm. But when people could afford their home, afford a vacation, a car, maybe 2 cars, maybe even a second home, when they could live their lives comfortably, have their families, right? And save for the future, and they never cared. They were almost willing to stick their heads in the sand,
Yeah.
right? We're not in that situation anymore.
Right.
And Vermont, it's so bad that you can't stick your head in the sand. I don't care who you are, because if you're sticking your head in the sand, you're suffering too.
Right.
You're suffering. And I don't care if you're one of the wealthiest people in the world. If you buy property in Vermont and you're paying, if you own a multi-million-dollar property, you don't want to be here, right? You're like, it's not worth it unless you have that home-oriented value. You're from here or something. But Donald Koch writes, Vermonters are known for splitting the ticket. Yes, they are. They
True.
vote independently.
True.
But other than that, I don't really have anything else to add. I just want to add, if you are not currently a subscriber to the Vermont Daily Chronicle, you should be. For just 30 cents a day, $9 a month, $108 a year, you can support free speech in Vermont. We run and publish articles across the political spectrum. If you're a progressive from Winooski and you have something you want to write about, we will publish it in the Vermont Daily Chronicle. Depending, Guy, unless there's some reason maybe we might not want to. But for the most part, we pretty much publish everything.
Yeah, we're a forum.
Yeah, unless
A real forum.
Unless it's like violent or there's
Of course.
But no, never because of somebody's political views. So anyways, if you support free speech in Vermont, you can support us. You do not have to be a paid subscriber. We are proud to put the information out for free, but obviously we can't do this for free. We can't do it alone. We can't do this without you. Your individual contributions are what support the Vermont Daily Chronicle. So if you're not already doing that, you should be. We're going to be launching a few products coming up in the next couple of weeks. I shouldn't say too much, but a couple things you might be able to buy to support us.
Cool. Swag.
Little swag. We'll see.
Right.
I've been working on it, and the ball is rolling. So
Good.
But anyways, folks. So thank you so much for tuning in, Guy. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I do. I just want to give a final shout out to the people doing the Trump sign waves.
Yeah.
Rebecca Petre and some others. Done like 30 of them around the state, and even not so much because it's Trump, but because they're out there and they're exercising their rights to say what they realize will be unpopular, controversial to some Vermonters, but they're out there doing that, and that's what America is, where we freely speak what we think is the best. And I think there's a bunch of sort of aging leftists, I think of them in front of the Montpelier post office, who they always have,
Stop war.
No nukes, stop war.
Yeah.
More, food for the people, not for the rich, kind of thing. And God bless them.
Yeah.
They're out there and they're speaking their truth in a peaceful way, and I admire that. And I admire the people who the Rebecca Petres of the world who are out there waving Trump flags. And everything in between. So that's our show for the day. Thank you very much. Please feel free to share it too. This is how people hear us. And we will see you again next Friday at the 802 Scoop Studios, or Friday at 4.